This biometric lock only works for people with the right DNA, sweetie. Bernice said it with a sickly, sweet smile, dangling the brand new tablet in front of my adopted daughter's face. The entire room laughed. My husband, Julian, just sipped his drink and looked away. They thought I was the submissive wife who would swallow the insult. They didn't know that while Bernice was mocking my daughter's genetics, I was mentally calculating the exact moment the sheriff would drag her off the property I secretly owned. I poured her more tea. "You're so right, Bernice," I said. "DNA is everything." If you're watching this video, tell me where you're from or what time it is for you. The living room of my house smelled like expensive cinnamon pine cones and the suffocating perfume my mother-in-law, Bernice, marinated herself in. It was a smell that usually gave me a headache within 15 minutes, but today, on Christmas morning, it made me want to gag. I sat on the edge of the oversized beige sectional, the one I had paid for with my bonus check last year, and watched the performance. That is what this was. It was not a family gathering. It was theater, and Bernice was the star, the director, and the ticket collector. She stood in front of the fireplace wearing a gold lame dress that was tight enough to show every curve and bright enough to signal aircraft. She looked ridiculous, like a disco ball that had aged poorly, but she wore it with the terrifying confidence of a woman who believed she was royalty. Next to her sat my sister-in-law, Kayla, and her husband, Barrett. They were leaning forward, their eyes greedy, watching Bernice reach into a massive red velvet sack. "All right, my precious grandbabies," Bernice announced, her voice booming off the vaulted ceilings. "Let us see who Grandma loves the most." I felt my stomach tighten. It was a physical sensation, like someone had reached inside my ribs and twisted a knot into my intestines. I looked down at my daughter, Zara. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor, her small hands folded patiently in her lap. She was 10 years old. She was smart, kind, and beautiful. But in this room, she was invisible. Or worse, she was a target. Zara looked up at me, her eyes wide and hopeful. She'd been asking for a tablet for school for months. She wanted to learn digital drawing. I had told her that maybe, if we were lucky, Santa would bring one. I had seen the boxes in Bernice's bag earlier. They were the right shape. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe I was wrong about them. Maybe this year would be different. Bernice pulled out 2 sleek white boxes. My heart hammered against my ribs. I recognized the logos immediately. These were the latest iPad Pros, the ones with the high storage capacity that cost over $1,000 each. Bernice handed one to Kayla's son, a bratty 12-year-old who was currently kicking the leg of my coffee table, and the other to Kayla's daughter. "For my blood," Bernice cooed, handing them over. "Only the best for the Wilson line." The kids tore into the wrapping paper like wild animals. There were no thank yous, just squeals of entitlement. Barrett, my brother-in-law, leaned back and swirled his scotch. My scotch, the 18-year-old single malt I had been saving for a promotion, and winked at Julian. "Looks like Grandma hit the jackpot this year, huh, Julian?" Barrett said, his voice loud and grating. "Crypto must be booming." I looked at Julian, my husband, the man who was supposed to be my partner. He was studying the ice in his glass, refusing to meet my eyes. He tapped his foot nervously. He knew. He knew exactly where the money for those gifts came from, and he was terrified I would figure it out. But I was still connecting the dots. I was still in denial. "And for Zara," Bernice said. Her voice changed. It dropped the sugary warmth and became flat, like she was reading a grocery list she didn't want to buy. Zara scrambled to her feet. She walked over to her grandmother, her smile tentative but genuine. She reached out her hands. Bernice reached into the bottom of the sack and pulled out a small, flat package. It wasn't a box. It was soft. It was wrapped in the comics section of the Sunday newspaper. My breath hitched. I wanted to stand up. I wanted to intercept it. I knew, with a mother's intuition, that whatever was in that newspaper was going to hurt. But I was frozen. I was paralyzed by the social contract that says you do not make a scene on Christmas. Here, Bernice said, dropping the package into Zara's hands. It is practical. You need practical things. Zara sat down and carefully peeled back the newspaper. The room went silent. The only sound was the rustling of paper and the low hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Inside the paper was a 3-pack of white tube socks, generic brand. The orange clearance sticker was still on the plastic, $1.99. Underneath the socks was a coloring book, not an art book, a toddler's coloring book with big, simple outlines of farm animals. Zara stared at the socks. She blinked, trying to process the logic. She was 10. She read at a high school level, and she had just been given a toddler's toy and gym socks while her cousins were setting up $2,000 worth of electronics 3 feet away. "Thank you, Grandma," Zara whispered. Her voice trembled. She didn't look up because she didn't want anyone to see her cry. "Is that it?" The words left my mouth before I could stop them. They were sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. Bernice looked at me, her eyebrows raising in mock surprise. "What do you mean? Is that it? Socks are useful, Nora. God knows the child goes through them running around outside. She should be grateful." "You gave Kayla's kids iPads," I said. I stood up. My legs felt shaky, but my voice was steadying. "You spent thousands of dollars on them, and you gave Zara socks? She is your grandchild, too." Bernice let out a short, dry laugh. It sounded like dry leaves crunching under a boot. "Oh, honey, let us not play pretend today. It is the Lord's birthday. We should be truthful." She gestured to the cousins, who were already ignoring us, glued to their screens. "Those devices have security features," Bernice said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Biometric locks, Face ID. They are very advanced. The man at the store told me they are designed to recognize the owner's features." She looked at Zara, then back at me, a cruel smirk playing on her lips. "This biometric lock only works for people with the right DNA, sweetie," she said. "The technology is very specific. It does not recognize strangers. It is a safety issue, really. I would hate for Zara to get locked out of a device she cannot use because she does not have the Wilson genetics." The room spun. I felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't just an insult. It was a declaration of war. She was saying my daughter, my beautiful adopted daughter, was a biological error, a security risk. Kayla giggled. She covered her mouth, but I saw the smile. "Oh, Mom, stop," she said, but she didn't mean it. She loved it. "Although, Barrett, did you hear that? Genetic security. That is actually really smart." Barrett snorted. "Yeah, I can't hack biology, right? Sorry, kiddo." He looked at Zara with a look of pity that was worse than hatred. "Maybe next year ask Santa for a DNA test." I looked at Julian. "Julian," I said. My voice was low. "Say something." Julian looked up. He looked at his mother, who was daring him to speak. He looked at his brother-in-law, the man he desperately wanted to impress. And then he looked at me. I saw the calculation in his eyes. He weighed his wife's pain against his mother's approval, and the scale tipped instantly. "Nora, relax," Julian mumbled. "Mom is just joking. It is a joke. Besides, Zara needs socks. Do not be ungrateful. You are ruining the vibe." Ungrateful. The word echoed in my skull. I looked at the turkey I had bought. I looked at the tree I had decorated. I looked at the house I paid for. And I realized, with a clarity that was terrifying, that I was alone in a room full of enemies. I needed to get out. The air in the house was suddenly too thin to breathe. If I stayed in that living room for one more second, I was going to flip the coffee table and shatter the illusion of our happy family, and I wasn't ready to do that yet. I needed a plan first. "We are out of ice," I announced. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, robotic and detached. "I am going to the gas station." "Get the good ice," Barrett shouted from the sofa, not even looking up from his phone. The cubed kind, not the crushed stuff. It melts too fast in my scotch. I walked to the hallway closet and grabbed my coat. I didn't look at them. I grabbed Zara's hand. "Come on, baby. Help me carry the bag." We walked out to the driveway. The cold December air hit my face like a slap, waking me up. My car, a sensible 5-year-old sedan, was parked in the corner of the driveway. It was blocked in by a massive matte black SUV that took up 2 spaces. It looked like a tank. It was Barrett's car, or at least the car he pretended to own. I had to maneuver my car onto the grass just to get around it. My tires spun in the mud, tearing up the lawn I paid a landscaper to maintain, but I didn't care. I just needed to move. I drove 3 blocks before I pulled over into the empty parking lot of a closed elementary school. I put the car in park and gripped the steering wheel. I squeezed it until my knuckles turned white, until the leather creaked under the pressure. I looked at Zara in the passenger seat. She was still holding the pack of socks. She hadn't opened them. She was staring out the window, her face blank. "I am sorry," I whispered. "I am so sorry, Zara." She shrugged, a small, heartbreaking motion. "It is okay, Mom. I know she does not like me. I am used to it." That broke me. She shouldn't be used to it. She was 10. She should be used to cartoons and ice cream, not navigating the complex hierarchy of her grandmother's racism. I let out a scream. It started low in my throat and erupted into a primal roar that filled the small car. I screamed until my throat burned. I screamed for the disrespect. I screamed for the socks. I screamed for Julian's cowardice. I thought about the bank account. I thought about the way Julian had asked me for money last week. He said he needed to transfer funds for a joint investment with his mother. He said it was for her eyes. He said she was going blind. Wait. My brain stopped screaming and started working. The iPads, the sheer cost of them. 2 iPad Pros, likely the 1 terabyte models plus cases, plus warranties. That was easily $3,000, maybe more, plus the catering, plus the decorations. Bernice lived on a fixed income. Her pension was tiny. She complained about the price of eggs every week. Where did she get $3,000 to drop on electronics? A cold feeling washed over me. It started at the base of my neck and spread down my spine. It was the feeling of a suspicion turning into a certainty. "Mom?" Zara asked, looking at me with concern. "Are you okay?" "I need to check something," I said. My hands were shaking as I reached into my purse. "I need to check something right now." My thumb hovered over the banking app icon on my phone. I hesitated. There is a part of the human brain that tries to protect you from trauma. It tells you not to look, not to ask, not to check. It tells you that as long as you don't see the numbers, the disaster hasn't happened yet. Schrödinger's bankruptcy. But I was done with illusions. I tapped the icon. The little loading wheel spun for what felt like an eternity. 3 seconds, 5 seconds. The screen flashed open. I stared at the numbers. I blinked, thinking maybe there was a smudge on the screen. I wiped it with my thumb. The numbers didn't change. My checking account balance was usually around $12,000. I kept it high for emergencies, for the house repairs, for the property taxes due in January. The balance read $2,450. I gasped. The air left my lungs as if I had been punched in the gut. $10,000 was gone, vanished. I scrolled down to the transaction history, my finger trembling so hard I almost dropped the phone. December 24th. Counter withdrawal. $10,000. It wasn't a hack. It wasn't a mysterious online purchase from Russia. It was a counter withdrawal. That meant someone had walked into the bank, spoken to a teller, and signed a piece of paper. "No," I whispered. "No, no, no." I tapped the transaction for details. There was an image of the withdrawal slip. I zoomed in. The signature was messy, a scrawl I had seen 1,000 times on birthday cards and anniversary notes. Julian Wilson. He hadn't just taken money, he had gutted us. $10,000. That was the roof money. That was Zara's tuition money. That was my safety net. I felt a wave of nausea. I opened the door and leaned out, taking deep gulps of the freezing air to keep from throwing up on the pavement. He gave it to her. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. The investment, the eye surgery. It was all a lie. He had drained our account to fund Bernice's ego trip. He had stolen my money I earned working 60-hour weeks staging houses to buy iPads for the cousins who bullied my daughter. I grabbed my phone again. I dialed the bank's 24-hour fraud line. I knew it was futile, but I had to hear a human voice confirm it. I had to know I wasn't crazy. "Customer service," a robotic voice answered. I navigated the menu, punching numbers with violent force. Finally, a woman answered. "This is Sarah. How can I help you?" "I need to report. I need to query a transaction," I said. My voice was shaking. "A withdrawal of $10,000 yesterday." "One moment, ma'am." The sound of typing. "I see a withdrawal at the Main Street branch. It was authorized by a Julian Wilson. He is a joint account holder. The identification was verified." "Did he say what it was for?" I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. "Was it a cashier's check? A transfer?" "It was cash, ma'am," Sarah said. Her voice was gentle, the pity evident. $10,000 in cash, large bills. Cash, untraceable, gone. I hung up the phone. I didn't cry. The time for crying was over. A cold, hard rage settled in my chest. It felt like swallowing a block of ice. "Mom," Zara whispered. I turned to her. "Put your seatbelt on, baby," I said. My voice was calm now, terrifyingly calm. "We are going back to the house." "Did you get the ice?" she asked. "No," I said, putting the car in gear, "but I am going to bring the fire." I walked into the house through the garage door, bypassing the living room. I could hear them laughing. Bernice was telling a story about her youth, probably lying about how many men proposed to her. "Go to your room, Zara," I said softly. "Put your headphones on. Watch a movie. Do not come out until I come get you." Zara nodded. She saw the look in my eyes. She ran up the back stairs without a word. I walked into the kitchen. Julian was in the pantry, digging through the shelves. He was looking for the crackers I hid from Barrett. "Julian," I said. He jumped. He spun around, a box of Ritz crackers in his hand. He looked guilty before I even said a word. He knew. "Hey, babe," he stammered. "You got the ice. Barrett is driving me crazy about his drink." "Where is the money, Julian?" He froze. "What?" "The $10,000, I said, stepping into the small pantry with him. It was claustrophobic. The smell of stale spices and his cologne filled the space. "I checked the app. You withdrew $10,000 in cash yesterday. Where is it?" He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Nora, listen. Keep your voice down. Mom will hear you." "I do not care if the neighbors hear me," I hissed. "You stole $10,000 from our savings. That is the property tax money. Why?" He put the crackers down on the shelf. He put his hands up, palms facing me, the universal gesture of a man trying to calm a wild animal. "I did not steal it," he said. His voice took on that condescending, soothing tone that made me want to scream. "I made an executive decision for the family. It was an emergency." "An emergency?" I laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "What emergency requires $10,000 cash on Christmas Eve? Was there a kidnapping I missed?" "It is Mom," he whispered, leaning in close. Her eyes. "The cataracts are worse than she let on. The doctor called her yesterday morning. He said if she does not get the surgery immediately, she could go blind before New Year's. Permanent blindness, Nora." He looked at me with wide, pleading eyes. He was selling it. He was really trying to sell it. "She was terrified," he continued. "She called me crying. She didn't want to worry you. You know how you get about money. She tried to hide it. But I couldn't let my mother go blind, Nora. I had to pay the specialist up front to book the operating room." So you gave her the cash? I asked. Yes. She is going to deposit it at the clinic on Tuesday. $10,000 for cataracts? I crossed my arms. That is double the national average. And since when do surgeons take cash in a briefcase like a drug deal? It is a private clinic, Julian said, getting defensive now. Top tier. She deserves the best. Look, I will pay it back. I have a bonus coming. You have been talking about this bonus for 3 years, Julian, I said. I have never seen a dime of it. You are being heartless, he snapped. He pushed past me, trying to escape the pantry. My mother is facing a medical crisis, and all you care about is your precious bank balance. You have no empathy. That is your problem, Nora. You are cold. He walked out into the kitchen, adjusting his shirt, putting the mask of the good son back on. I stood there among the cans of soup and boxes of pasta, heartless. He called me heartless. I was the one who paid the mortgage. I was the one who bought the groceries. I was the one who made sure the heat stayed on, and he was the one who lied. I didn't believe him. Not for a second. Bernice didn't have cataracts. She had greed. I followed him back into the living room. I needed proof. I couldn't just accuse her based on intuition. Julian would gaslight me until I thought I was crazy. I needed to catch her in the act. Bernice was sitting on the sofa, holding court. She had a glass of red wine in one hand, my expensive Pinot Noir, and she was gesturing wildly with the other. So I told the deacon, she said, her voice loud and clear. I said, look here, I do not need glasses to see sin. I can smell it. Everyone laughed. Mom, are you okay? Julian asked, rushing over to her. He touched her shoulder gently. How are your eyes feeling? Is the light too bright? I can dim the lamps. He was doubling down on the lie. He was performing for me. Bernice blinked. She looked confused for a split second, then she remembered the script. She squinted dramatically, fluttering her eyelids. Oh, baby, she said, her voice becoming weak and tremulous. It is a little blurry today. The edges are getting dark, but I did not want to ruin Christmas. You are so brave, Mom, Kayla said, scrolling on her phone. I walked over to the side table where I had left the bottle of wine. I picked it up. It was a reserve bottle, and the label on the back had incredibly small gold cursive font. It was hard to read, even with perfect vision. Bernice, I said. My voice was sweet. I wanted to ask you about this wine. I know you love reds. Does this contain sulfites? I know you are allergic, and I cannot read the label without my reading glasses. I held the bottle out to her, but I didn't hand it to her. I held it about 3 feet away from her face. Bernice didn't hesitate. Her vanity was stronger than her commitment to the lie. She hated admitting she didn't know something about wine. Let me see, she said. She leaned forward. She didn't squint. Her eyes locked onto the bottle. It says, "Contains sulfites, yes," she read. She narrowed her eyes, reading the fine print at the bottom. And it says, "Bottled in Napa Valley, 2021. Yes, it has sulfites, Nora. You should be more careful what you serve guests." I smiled. Thank you, Bernice. You have amazing eyesight. That print is tiny. I am surprised you could read it with the cataracts and everything going dark. The room went quiet. Bernice froze. She realized what she had done. She looked at Julian, panic flaring in her eyes. Well, she stammered, pulling back. It comes and goes. The doctor said I have moments of clarity. It is a fluctuating condition. Right, I said, fluctuating, like the stock market, or the truth. Julian shot me a look of pure venom. Drop it, Nora, he mouthed. I didn't drop it. I just filed it away. She could see perfectly fine. There was no surgery. There was no doctor. There was just a bag of cash and a family of grifters. 10 minutes later, I excused myself to use the restroom. I didn't go to the powder room near the kitchen. I went to the guest bathroom in the hallway, the one right next to the linen closet where Bernice had dumped her coat. As I approached the door, I heard voices. It was Bernice and Kayla. They were inside the bathroom with the door cracked slightly open. They must have thought the exhaust fan was loud enough to cover their conversation. I stopped. I pressed my back against the wall, holding my breath. I felt like a spy in my own home. Did you see her face? Kayla was laughing. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound. She looked like she was going to cry over the socks. God, she is so pathetic. She knows her place, Bernice said. I could hear the sound of lipstick being applied. She just needs a reminder every now and then. Who does she think she is, questioning me about wine? Do you think she suspects about the money? Kayla asked. Her voice dropped a little. Please, Bernice scoffed. Nora is clueless. She believes whatever Julian tells her. She actually thinks I am going to a clinic on Tuesday. What are you actually going to do with it? Kayla asked. Did you decide? Well, Bernice said, I already put a deposit down on that Louis Vuitton set, the luggage. I need to travel in style if we are going to Miami in February, and I gave $5,000 to Barrett for his situation. He said he needed it to clear some debt before he could buy the new car. My blood ran cold. They weren't even hiding it from each other. The cataract story was a joke to them, a shared punchline. My $10,000 wasn't going to a doctor. It was going to buy designer luggage and bail out my deadbeat brother-in-law. You are a genius, Mom, Kayla said. Seriously, how did you get Julian to do it so fast? Oh, it is easy, Bernice said. I just cried a little. Told him I was scared of the dark. Men are simple, honey. You threaten their mommy and they open their wallets. Julian is a good boy. He knows who his real family is. And Nora? Nora is just the bank, Bernice said. As long as the check's clear, she can stay. But the moment she stops paying, well, we can always find Julian a better wife. Someone with a little more class. I backed away from the door. My hands were trembling so hard I thought I might vibrate through the floorboards. Just the bank. That's what I was to them. I wasn't a wife. I wasn't a daughter-in-law. I was an ATM with a pulse. I walked back down the hall, past the family photos on the wall, photos of Julian and me smiling, photos that now looked like evidence of a crime. I went into my home office and locked the door. I needed to think. I needed to see the paperwork. I needed to know exactly how much leverage I had. I walked over to the filing cabinet in the corner, the one where I kept the mortgage deed and the property title. I reached into my pocket for my keys, but then I stopped. The lock on the cabinet was scratched. The metal was bent. Someone had tried to pry it open. I stared at the lock on the filing cabinet. It was a simple silver cylinder, the kind you can open with a paperclip if you have watched enough YouTube videos, but to me, it was the seal on my sanity. The metal around the keyhole was scratched. There were tiny, jagged silver marks where the black paint had been chipped away. Someone had tried to pry it open. I felt a cold sweat break out on the back of my neck. I reached into my pocket for my key ring, my fingers fumbling. I dropped them. The keys hit the hardwood floor with a loud jingle that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet house. I froze, waiting for footsteps. I waited for Julian to come down the hall and ask what I was doing in my own office on Christmas Day. But there was only the muffled sound of the television from the living room and Bernice's braying laughter. I picked up the keys and jammed the small silver one into the lock. It didn't turn. It stuck halfway. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced my chest. If they had gotten in, if they had seen the papers, everything was over. Inside that cabinet was the folder labeled Zuri Holdings. Inside that folder was the deed to the house. And on that deed, Julian's name was nowhere to be found. If Julian saw that, he would know I had never trusted him. He would know I had been preparing for the end since the beginning. Turn, I whispered, gritting my teeth. Damn you, turn. I jiggled the key violently. I could feel the pins inside grinding against the metal. It wasn't just locked, it was jammed. Whoever had tried to break in had damaged the mechanism. They had been forceful, clumsy, and desperate. I looked around the room for a tool. I grabbed a heavy letter opener from my desk. It had a brass handle and a dull blade. I wedged the tip into the gap between the drawer and the frame. I didn't care about the paint anymore. I didn't care about the finish. I leaned my weight into it. "Come on," I grunted. The metal groaned. I pushed harder. My hand slipped, and the brass handle slammed into my palm, bruising the skin. I bit my lip to keep from crying out. I tasted blood. With a loud pop, the latch gave way. The drawer slid open. I fell to my knees and started rifling through the hanging folders. Tax returns, insurance policies, warranties. My heart stopped. The Zuri Holdings folder was gone from the front. I started hyperventilating. I pulled folders out in clumps, throwing them onto the floor. They took it. They found it. They knew. Then I saw it. It had been shoved to the very back, behind a thick file of appliance manuals. It was upside down. I grabbed it and flipped it open. The deed was there. The operating agreement for the LLC was there. I let out a breath that was half sob, half laugh. They hadn't taken it because they didn't know what it was. They had broken in looking for cash. They were looking for an envelope of emergency money or jewelry. They had shuffled right past the legal document that made them homeless because they were too stupid to read the fine print. I couldn't leave it here. It wasn't safe. The lock was broken. I took the thick envelope and looked around the room. I couldn't hide it in the safe. Julian knew the combination. I couldn't hide it in the closet. Bernice snooped through clothes. I grabbed a roll of duct tape from my drawer. I crawled under my heavy oak desk. I lay on my back, staring at the underside of the wood. I taped the envelope flat against the bottom of the desktop, reinforcing it with 3 strips of gray tape. It was crude. It was something a drug dealer would do in a movie. But as I lay there in the dust, listening to my in-laws celebrate with my money, I realized I wasn't just a wife anymore. I was a resistance fighter in occupied territory. I needed backup. I sat in my office chair staring at the phone. It was Christmas Day. Calling my attorney was rude. It was expensive. It was desperate. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a gruff voice answered. "Nora, it is December 25th. Unless you are in jail or the house is on fire, this bill is going to be double." "Daniel," I said. My voice was steady, but my hand was gripping the phone so tight my fingers hurt. "I need you to listen to me. I have a situation." "Can it wait until Tuesday?" Daniel asked. I heard the sound of children playing in the background. He was with his family, a real family. "No," I said. "Julian stole $10,000 from our joint account. He gave it to his mother. And I just found evidence that they broke into my filing cabinet." Silence on the other line. The sound of children faded as Daniel likely walked into another room. "Okay," Daniel said. His voice was professional now. The shark had entered the water. "Financial infidelity is serious, Nora, but it is a civil matter for a divorce proceeding. Why are you calling me on the emergency line?" "I want them out," I said. "All of them. Bernice, Julian, his sister, her husband. I want them out of my house. Tonight." Daniel sighed. It was a long, weary sound. "Nora, we have talked about this. You cannot just kick them out. Julian is your husband. He has marital rights to the dwelling until a judge says otherwise. And Bernice, how long has she been staying there?" 3 weeks, I said. "She came for Thanksgiving and never left." "Then she has established residency," Daniel said. "In Georgia, if she has a toothbrush and receives mail, she is a tenant, even if she does not pay rent. You have to serve a 30-day notice to vacate. If she refuses, we have to file an unlawful detainer. The courts are backed up. It could take 3 months." 3 months? I felt the room shrinking. "Daniel, they are destroying everything. They are mocking my daughter. They are stealing my money. I cannot live with them for 3 months. I will kill them." "Do not say that," Daniel warned. "Not even as a joke." "There has to be another way," I pleaded. a loophole, anything. There is the constructive eviction path, but it is risky, Daniel said slowly. If there is a safety hazard, a code violation that makes the house uninhabitable, or if there is criminal activity occurring on the premises that endangers a minor. Criminal activity, I repeated. Real crime, Nora. Not just being a bad mother-in-law, drugs, illegal gambling, fraud. If you can prove the house is being used for criminal enterprise, we can get an emergency protective order. That bypasses the 30-day rule. I looked at the broken lock on my cabinet. I thought about the cash withdrawal. I thought about the cataract surgery lie. What counts as fraud? I asked. Documented theft, false pretenses, scams. But you need proof, hard proof. Text messages, recordings, bank trails, hearsay does not work in court. Okay, I said. A plan was forming in the dark corners of my mind. I will get you proof. Nora, Daniel said, his voice warning, do not do anything illegal to catch them. Do not hack their phones. Do not put cameras in the bathrooms. The hard way is the only way that stands up in front of a judge. I know, I said. I will do it the hard way. I hung up the phone. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was an investigator, and I was living at the crime scene. The floorboards vibrated. It wasn't a subtle shake. It was a rhythmic thumping that rattled the picture frames on my desk. Outside, the roar of an engine sounded like a jet landing on my front lawn. I stood up and walked to the window. A vehicle was pulling into my driveway. It was monstrous. A matte black SUV that looked like it had been designed for military warfare, but polished for a rap video. It was wider than the driveway. One set of tires was crushing my dormant hydrangeas. It didn't just park, it conquered. It pulled up diagonally, blocking both my sedan and Julian's car, effectively trapping us all. The driver's door swung open. Barrett stepped out. My brother-in-law was a man who looked like he was constantly auditioning for a role as a Wall Street villain, but failing the callback. He wore a suit jacket over a t-shirt, sunglasses even though it was overcast, and loafers with no socks. He slammed the door of the truck, a rental it had to be, and strutted toward the house. He was carrying nothing, no gifts, no food, just his own ego. I met him at the front door before he could ring the bell. I didn't want him waking Zara. "Merry Christmas to the peasants!" Barrett shouted, throwing his arms wide. The smell of expensive, musky cologne hit me instantly. It smelled like desperate ambition. "Hello, Barrett," I said, blocking the doorway. "You are blocking the driveway. Can you move the truck?" He lowered his sunglasses and looked at me as if I were a speck of dust on his lapel. "Relax, Nora. It is a holiday. Nobody is going anywhere. Besides, look at that beast. It is a tank. You do not park a tank, you position it." He pushed past me. He didn't ask to come in. He just invaded. "Where is the bar?" he asked, looking around. "I need a drink." The traffic was brutal. Peasants everywhere. "In the kitchen," I said stiffly. He took 2 steps, then stopped and patted his pockets. He frowned. He turned back to me, his face shifting from arrogance to a slippery, fake charm. "Hey, Nora, quick question." He lowered his voice, leaning in. "Do you have a 20? Like a $20 bill?" I stared at him. "Excuse me?" "The pizza guy," he said, waving a hand vaguely toward the street. "I ordered a few pies for the game later. He's going to be here in 10 minutes. I only have hundreds on me. You know how it is. The ATM only spits out the big boys. I do not want to tip the guy a Benjamin, right?" I looked at his jacket. It was cheap polyester trying to pass as wool. I looked at the $100,000 truck in the driveway. And then I looked at his eyes. They were shifting, nervous. He didn't have hundreds. He didn't have a 20. He was broke. "I do not have cash, Barrett," I lied. "I spent it all on groceries." His smile faltered. For a second, the mask slipped, and I saw a flash of pure anger. "Right, of course, plastic economy, whatever." He spun around and marched into the living room, shouting for Julian. Yo, Julian, tell me you have cash for the pizza. Your wife is tapped out. I closed the front door. The cold air was gone, but the chill remained. He was driving a vehicle that cost more than my annual salary, but he was begging for pizza money. That truck wasn't an asset. It was a liability on wheels, and I was going to find out exactly who actually owned it. I went to the kitchen to check on the turkey, but really I was hiding. I needed 10 minutes to compose myself before I started my investigation, but peace was not on the menu. A loud crash came from the direction of my office. It was the sound of something heavy hitting the floor, followed by the splash of liquid. Oh, a child's voice said. I ran. I sprinted down the hallway. I had left the office door unlocked when I went to answer the door for Barrett. Stupid. Careless. I threw the door open. The scene before me made my vision blur with red rage. My office chair, my $700 ergonomic chair, was spun around. Standing on the seat in his muddy sneakers was Mason, Kayla's 12-year-old son. He was reaching for the shelf where I kept my architectural models, but the real disaster was on the desk. Mason had been drinking a large grape Fanta. The can was now on its side. A purple river was flowing across my desk. It wasn't just a spill, it was a deluge. The sticky purple liquid was soaking into the large A1 sheets of paper spread out on the workspace. My blueprints. Get down, I screamed. Mason jumped. He scrambled off the chair, knocking the mouse and keyboard onto the floor. He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. I was just looking, he yelled. I ran to the desk. I grabbed the blueprints, trying to lift them out of the puddle, but it was too late. The paper was saturated. The purple dye had obliterated the ink lines. The detailed elevation drawings of the community center, a project I had been working on for 6 months, a project that was due on January 2nd, were ruined. Look what you did, I shouted. I held up the sodden, dripping paper. This is my work. This is my job. Nora. Kayla appeared in the doorway. She didn't look at the mess. She looked at her son. Why are you screaming at my child? She demanded. She rushed over and pulled Mason behind her, shielding him from me as if I were a monster. He destroyed my blueprints, I said, my voice shaking. Look at this, Kayla. This is thousands of dollars of work. He was standing on my chair with muddy shoes and drinking soda over my documents. Kayla glanced at the purple mess and rolled her eyes. It is just paper, Nora, she said dismissively. Print it again. God, you are so dramatic. He was just exploring. He is creative. You should encourage that curiosity instead of traumatizing him. Encourage him? I threw the soggy paper into the trash can with a wet thud. He is 12, Kayla. He knows not to stand on furniture. He knows not to drink over electronics. This is not curiosity. It is disrespect. He was bored, Kayla snapped. The internet in the living room is slow because Barrett is doing important trades. Mason just wanted to play a game on the computer. Maybe if you were a better hostess and had things for kids to do, he would not have to wander around. She patted Mason's head. Come on, sweetie. Let us go get some pizza. Aunt Nora is having a mood swing. She turned and walked out, leaving me standing in a puddle of grape soda and ruined dreams. Important trades, she had said. Barrett was trading on a holiday? With no internet? I looked at the computer screen. Mason hadn't been playing a game. He had minimized a window when I walked in. I grabbed a paper towel and wiped the keyboard. I hit the spacebar to wake the screen. It wasn't a game. It was a browser window. Mason hadn't been playing. He had been watching a streamer. But in the background, another tab was open. It must have been Barrett's tab from earlier before Mason took over. I clicked it. It was an online gambling site, BetKing. The account was logged in. The balance in the top right corner flashed in bright red numbers, -$400. Barrett wasn't trading stocks. He was betting on college football, and he was losing. The house didn't settle down until 2 in the morning. The pizza had been eaten, the wine had been drunk, and the insults had been hurled until everyone passed out from exhaustion. I lay in bed next to Julian. He was snoring. a sound that used to comfort me, but now sounded like the growl of a thief. I waited until his breathing was deep and rhythmic. I slid out of bed. I put on my slippers and my robe. I grabbed a pair of latex cleaning gloves from under the sink in the master bath. I was going fishing. I crept down the hallway. The floorboards creaked, and I froze every time, my heart hammering against my ribs. I made it to the kitchen. The trash can was overflowing. Paper plates, pizza crusts, and empty beer bottles were piled high, but I wasn't interested in the kitchen trash. I needed the trash from the guest room where Barrett and Kayla were sleeping. I knew they would have generated trash. Barrett was the kind of man who bought things just to unwrap them. I walked past the guest room door. I could hear Barrett's heavy, erratic snoring. I moved to the small bathroom connected to the guest room. The door was ajar. I slipped inside. The small wicker basket was full. I carried it silently into the laundry room and closed the door. I turned on the small light over the dryer. I put on the gloves. "This is my life," I whispered to myself. "I am digging through garbage at 3 a.m. on Christmas." I tipped the basket out onto the top of the washing machine, used tissues, disgusting, a candy wrapper, an empty pack of cigarettes. Barrett smoked, even though he told everyone he quit, and then paper. I smoothed out a crumpled ball of receipt paper. It was from Best Buy, dated December 23rd. 2 iPad Pro 12.9-inch, 2 Apple Pencils, 2 Magic Keyboards. Total, $3,412. Payment method, cash. I stared at the receipt. Cash. My cash. Julian's withdrawal. I dug deeper. I found another crumpled ball. This one wasn't thermal receipt paper. It was standard printer paper. It had been ripped in half, but the text was still legible. I pieced it together. Final notice of default. Honda Financial Services. 2018 Honda Civic. Amount past due, $1,800. To avoid repossession, please contact us immediately. I frowned. A Honda Civic? Barrett didn't drive a Civic. He drove the tank outside. I looked at the date on the notice. December 10th. He had a car. A normal, sensible car. And he was losing it. He was $1,800 behind on a Civic, but he had rented a luxury SUV to drive to my house to insult me. He wasn't just broke. He was underwater. He was drowning. I took my phone out and snapped photos of the receipt and the repossession notice. I had proof of the theft. I had proof of the financial ruin, but I still needed the criminal activity Daniel had asked for. Being broke wasn't a crime. Being a liar wasn't a crime. But what was happening in the basement? That might be different. The next morning, the kitchen smelled like stale beer and resentment. Barrett was sitting at the island wearing the same clothes as yesterday. His eyes were bloodshot. He looked like a man who had lost a fight with a demon. I walked in to make coffee. I needed caffeine to function. I had slept for 2 hours. "Hey," Barrett grunted. He didn't look at me. He tapped his finger on the granite countertop. "Coffee, now." I paused, holding the bag of beans. "Good morning to you too, Barrett." "Do not give me the attitude," he snapped, wincing at his own volume. "My head is splitting. Make me a double shot espresso. And do not use the pods. Use the machine. I need the crema to be thick. The pods taste like dirt." I looked at him. He was sitting in my kitchen, demanded I serve him like a barista after his son destroyed my work and his wife insulted my daughter. "The machine takes time to heat up," I said calmly. "I have time," he muttered. He pulled his phone out of his pocket and placed it face up on the counter. Then he put his head in his hands. "Just make it strong." I ground the beans. The loud whir of the grinder made him groan. Good. I tamped the espresso into the portafilter. I locked it in. I started the extraction. The rich smell filled the kitchen. "Here," I said, sliding the small cup across the counter. He took a sip and grimaced. "Bitter." "You burned the bean, Nora. You have to watch the temperature." "God, can't you get anything right?" He stood up. "I need sugar. Where is the sugar?" "Pantry," I said. "Top shelf." He groaned and walked toward the pantry, leaving his phone on the counter. I was wiping the counter with a rag. I moved closer to the phone. It buzzed. The screen lit up. I couldn't unlock it. It was an iPhone. It needed his face. But the notification settings were lax. He had previews enabled. A banner appeared at the top of the lock screen. It was a text message. The sender wasn't a name. It was a number. Sharky. Bookie. You are down $5,000 on the Lakers game. I need payment by noon or we are going to have a problem. Do not make me come to the house. My heart hammered. Sharky, a bookie. Do not make me come to the house. That wasn't debt. That was a threat. Barrett wasn't just gambling online. He was gambling with loan sharks, dangerous people. Found it, Barrett yelled from the pantry. I stepped back from the phone just as he walked back in. He dumped 3 packets of sugar into the espresso and downed it in one gulp. Terrible, he said, wiping his mouth. Absolutely terrible service. He grabbed his phone and stormed out. I watched him go. A smile touched my lips. Criminal activity, Daniel had said. Having a loan shark threaten violence at a residence. That sounded like a safety hazard to me. The afternoon sun was a spotlight exposing every flaw in my carefully maintained life. Bernice had decided to host a social in the backyard. She hadn't asked me. She had just filled my patio with women in wide-brimmed hats, her church friends, who were currently drinking my lemonade and judging my landscaping. I stood by the sliding glass door, watching. My chest felt tight, like a rubber band stretched to its limit. I wanted to go out there and tell them to leave. I wanted to scream that they were trespassing, but I didn't. I was still trapped in the habit of being polite, of keeping the peace for a husband who wouldn't even look at me. "Zara, honey, bring more napkins," Bernice shouted from her chaise lounge. She looked like a beached whale in sequins. "And move faster, child. Sloth is a sin." I watched Zara. My little girl was carrying a tray of paper napkins, navigating the wet concrete around the pool. She looked exhausted. She looked small. Then I saw Mason, the blueprint destroyer. He was running around the edge of the pool, dripping wet, screaming like a banshee. He saw Zara. He didn't slow down. He sped up. "Watch out!" I yelled, my hand hitting the glass. It was too late. Mason slammed into Zara's shoulder. It wasn't an accident. He dropped his shoulder into her like a linebacker. Zara stumbled. Her feet slipped on the wet tile. Her arms windmilled, napkins flying into the air like white doves before she fell backward into the deep end. Splash. The sound was sickening. Zara couldn't swim. We were supposed to start lessons next summer. "Help her!" I screamed. I tore open the door and sprinted across the patio. I expected Julian to move. He was standing right there holding a beer 3 feet from the edge. He just stared. He watched his daughter thrash in the water, his face blank, paralyzed by his own uselessness. I didn't think. I didn't take off my shoes. I dove. The cold water hit me like a shockwave. I opened my eyes in the chlorine sting, searching for the thrashing shape of my daughter. I grabbed her waist. She was clawing at me, panic-stricken. I kicked hard, dragging us both to the surface. We broke the water, gasping. I hauled her to the steps. She was coughing, spitting up water, clinging to me like I was the only solid thing in the universe. "I got you," I choked out, pushing wet hair out of her face. "I got you, baby. Breathe." I looked up. The church ladies were tittering behind their hands. Bernice hadn't even stood up. She was sipping her tea. "Well," Bernice said, her voice carrying over the silence, "that is what happens when you are clumsy. God punishes the careless." I felt something snap inside my brain. It was a physical sensation, an audible pop of the last tether holding me to civilization. Kayla walked over. She looked down at us, shivering on the concrete. She smirked. "Oh my God, look at her hair," Kayla laughed. "She looks like a wet rat. Mason, baby, are you okay? Did she hit you?" "She fell funny," Mason giggled. "You are so dramatic, Nora," Kayla sneered. "She is fine. It is just water. Stop making a scene." I stood up. My dress was heavy with water. My shoes squelched. I walked up the steps. I walked straight up to Kayla. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I swung my hand. Crack. My palm connected with her cheek with a sound like a pistol shot. It was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Kayla's head snapped to the side. She stumbled back, clutching her face, her eyes wide with shock. The church ladies gasped. "You touch her again," I said. My voice was low, a growl that came from the deepest part of my gut. "You look at her wrong. You let your son near her, and I will bury you." I looked at Julian. He was staring at me, his mouth open, his beer forgotten. "And you," I said to him, "you let her drown. You stood there and watched." "Nora, He stammered. "Do not speak to me," I said. "You are dead to me." I picked up Zara, who was shivering against my leg, and walked into the house. I left a trail of water on the hardwood floors. I didn't care about the floors anymore. I didn't care about the marriage. The water had washed away the fear. All that was left was the rage. After I got Zara dried off and tucked into bed with a warm blanket and a locked door, I went downstairs to deal with the wet towels. I needed to put them in the dryer, but the laundry room was full of Bernice's delicates that she insisted had to be air-dried. I decided to take the wet pool towels to the basement. I had a backup washer and dryer down there next to my staging inventory. It was my private workspace, usually off limits to the family. I opened the door to the basement stairs. Usually my basement smelled like cedar blocks and lavender sachets, the scents I used to keep my inventory fresh. I kept high-end velvet sofas, silk rugs, and antique lamps down there. It was thousands of dollars of inventory. But today, the air that hit my face made me gag. It smelled like old grease, fried onions, stale cigarette smoke, and something else. Unwashed bodies. I froze on the top step. My heart started hammering again, a different rhythm than the panic at the pool. This was the rhythm of a predator, sensing an intruder. "Hello?" I called out. Silence. Then a scuffle. The sound of something heavy being dragged across concrete. Then silence again. I walked down the stairs. The motion sensor lights should have clicked on. They didn't. The bulb had been unscrewed. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. I walked to the door of my storage room. It was a heavy, steel-reinforced door where I kept the most expensive items. I reached for the handle. Locked. I frowned. I never locked this door from the outside. I tried to turn the knob. It was rigid. Then I noticed the scratch marks on the floor, deep gouges in the concrete leading under the door, and the smell. It was coming from inside the room. Someone was in there. I put my ear to the metal. I heard a cough, a wet, hacking cough, and the low murmur of a television. My storage room didn't have a television. I backed away slowly. My mind raced. Julian wouldn't be down here. Barrett was too lazy. Bernice couldn't navigate the stairs with a TV. Who was in my house? I didn't bang on the door. If I banged on the door, they would hide. They would turn off the TV. They would play dead. I needed to see them. I needed to know who I was dealing with. I went back up the stairs and locked the door to the kitchen. Then I turned off the kitchen lights and sat on a stool in the shadows, watching the basement door. I waited. 10 minutes. 20. My wet clothes were cold and clammy against my skin, but I didn't move. I was a statue of vengeance. Finally, the handle turned. The door opened a crack. Bernice slipped out. She wasn't wearing her sequins anymore. She was wearing a bathrobe, and she was carrying a large plastic tray. On the tray were 3 plates of food, the lobster and crab cakes from the party. I held my breath. She looked left. She looked right. She didn't see me in the dark corner. She began to descend the stairs, moving with a surprising agility for a woman who claimed she couldn't walk to the mailbox without assistance. I followed her. I took off my shoes so my bare feet would be silent on the wood. I crept to the top of the landing and peered down. Bernice knocked on the steel door, 3 sharp raps, a code. The door opened from the inside. A sliver of light spilled out. I saw a hand reach out, a man's hand tattooed and dirty, and take the tray. "Is there more bread?" a rough voice asked. "Do not be greedy," Bernice whispered harshly. "That is premium crab. Eat it and be quiet. She is on a rampage upstairs." "She almost caught us earlier," the voice grumbled. "Tried the handle." "She is an idiot," Bernice hissed. "She thinks it is just a stuck lock. Just keep the noise down. And tell Linda to stop smoking. The vents carry the smell." Linda, a woman. Bernice turned to come back up. I scrambled backward, retreating into the kitchen before she could spot me. My mind was reeling. She wasn't just stealing my money. She wasn't just insulting my daughter. She was running a boarding house, in my basement, in the room where I kept my inventory. Strangers, with tattoos, smoking, eating my food, living under my floorboards. I felt a wave of nausea, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't a violation anymore. This was a weapon. Daniel had said, criminal activity, safety hazards. I had them. I waited until Bernice had gone to bed. I waited until the house was silent, save for the rhythmic snoring of the parasites upstairs. I went back to the basement door. I needed photos. I needed undeniable proof of what was behind that steel door. I didn't have the key. Bernice obviously had given it to the tenants. I knelt in front of the lock. It was a standard pin tumbler I had installed myself 3 years ago. I remembered where I kept the spare key, taped inside the false bottom of a paint can on the shelf in the laundry area. I found the can. Antique white. I pried the lid off. The key was gone. Of course, Bernice was thorough. I looked around for a tool. A screwdriver? Too thick. I remembered the bobby pins in my hair. I pulled 2 out. I stripped the rubber tips off with my teeth. "Come on, Nancy Drew," I whispered to myself. "You watched a tutorial on this once." I inserted the first pin as a tension wrench. I inserted the second as a pick. My hands were shaking. I forced them to steady. I raked the pins. Nothing. I tried again. Click. 1 pin set. My heart hammered against my ribs. What if they were awake? What if they had a gun? Click. 2 pins. I pushed harder on the tension wrench. Click. 3. The cylinder turned. I didn't open the door immediately. I pulled my phone out. I opened the camera app. I turned the flash off. I turned the brightness down. I pushed the door open just an inch. The smell hit me harder this time. Stale smoke and sweat. I peered inside. My beautiful staging room was a nightmare. My velvet sofa was pushed against the wall, covered in a dirty sheet. 2 mattresses were on the floor in the center of the room. On one mattress, a man was sleeping, his mouth open, a tattoo of a snake winding up his neck. On the other, a woman, Linda, presumably, was watching a small portable TV with headphones on. But the real horror was the wiring. They had run orange extension cords from the single ceiling bulb. The cords were daisy-chained across the room, tangled like spaghetti. They were plugged into 3 hot plates that were sitting on top of my antique mahogany sideboard. One of the hot plates was still glowing red, a pot of something boiling on it. It was a fire trap, a literal tinderbox. If one spark hit the velvet or the cardboard boxes of inventory, the whole house would go up in minutes. And Zara's room was directly 2 floors above this. I raised my phone. I took a photo of the sleeping man. I took a photo of the woman. I took a photo of the hot plates on the antique wood. I took a photo of the daisy-chained wires sparking near the ceiling. I stepped back and pulled the door shut. I locked it. I backed up the stairs, my chest heaving. They were burning my house down. They were risking my daughter's life for, what? $500 a month? I looked at the photos on my phone. They were clear. They were damning. "Checkmate," I whispered. I didn't sleep. I sat in my car in the driveway at 6 a.m., the engine running to keep the heat on. I needed privacy. I texted the photos to Daniel. Nora, this is in my basement. Strangers, hot plates, daisy-chained extension cords. My MIL is renting it out. 3 minutes later, my phone rang. Holy Mother of God, Daniel said. He didn't say hello. Nora, get out of the house. That wiring is a bomb. I know, I said. Is it enough? Enough? Daniel laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. It is an illegal commercial dwelling. It is a fire code violation. It is an insurance nightmare. If a fire started, your policy would be void. This is criminal endangerment of a minor. So I can evict them? We can file for an emergency removal order, Daniel said. But that still takes 24 to 48 hours to get a judge to sign, especially during the holidays. I cannot wait 48 hours, Daniel, I said. They are cooking on my mahogany. Okay, Daniel said. There is the nuclear option. You are the landlord. You have a duty to repair dangerous conditions immediately. If you discover faulty wiring that poses an imminent threat to life, you are legally obligated to shut down the power to the affected area until it is remediated. The affected area is the main breaker panel, I said. It feeds the whole house. Well, Daniel said, his voice dripping with lawyerly plausibility, if you cannot isolate the circuit because of the illegal tampering, you might have to shut down the whole grid for safety. You cannot have electricity running to a compromised system. It would be irresponsible. And if the power is out, I asked, and the heat, then the dwelling becomes uninhabitable, Daniel said. Tenants usually leave uninhabitable dwellings on their own accord, especially if there is no Wi-Fi. I smiled. It was a cold, wolfish smile. I think I smell burning plastic right now, I said. I cannot advise you to lie, Daniel said, but if you have a genuine concern for safety, you should call the utility company immediately. Thanks, Daniel. Be careful, Nora. When you corner a rat, it bites. I am not cornering them, I said. I am smoking them out. I waited until everyone was awake. It was 9 a.m. The smell of bacon, my bacon, was wafting from the kitchen. Bernice was humming a gospel tune. Barrett was shouting at the TV because his team was losing. I picked up my phone and dialed the power company emergency line. Georgia Power, emergency dispatch. This is Nora Wilson, I said. My voice was breathless, panicked. I am at 422 Oak Street. I smell burning. I think the wiring in my basement is melting. There are sparks. I am terrified of a fire. Ma'am, evacuate the house, the dispatcher said. We are sending a crew to cut the line at the street immediately. Do not touch the panel. Okay, I said. Please hurry. I hung up. I walked into the living room. Barrett was sprawled on the sofa. Julian was reading a magazine. Good morning, sunshine, Barrett sneered. Fix the internet. It is lagging again. I cannot, I said. I sat down in the armchair and crossed my legs. I just called the power company. You what? Julian looked up. Suddenly, the TV died. The hum of the refrigerator stopped. The lights in the hallway flickered and went black. The house plunged into a gray, silent gloom. What the hell? Barrett yelled, jumping up. My game! I had money on that. The power is out, I said calmly. They cut the line. Why would they do that? Bernice screamed, coming in from the kitchen with a half-cooked spatula of eggs. I have biscuits in the oven. I reported a safety hazard, I said. I looked at Bernice directly in the eye. I told them there was illegal wiring in the basement. I told them someone had rigged up extension cords and hot plates and created a fire trap. They said they had to kill the power to the whole house to prevent an explosion. Bernice's face went white. She dropped the spatula. It clattered onto the floor, egg yolk splattering on her shoes. You told them, she whispered. I had to, I said, for safety. We would not want the house to burn down with all of us in it, would we, Bernice? Especially with guests. Julian stood up. Nora, are you crazy? It is freezing outside. The heat runs on electric ignition. We will freeze. I guess you will, I said. Better cold than dead. Turn it back on, Barrett shouted, advancing on me. Call them back. Tell them it was a mistake. I cannot, I said. They have to send an inspector to certify the wiring is safe before they reconnect it. And since the wiring is definitely not safe, it might take a while, maybe a week, maybe 2. I stood up. I am going to take Zara to the library, I said. It is warm there. You guys have fun. Oh, and Barrett, the Wi-Fi is down, forever. I walked out of the room. Behind me, the chaos exploded. Barrett was swearing. Julian was trying to call the power company. And Bernice was silent. She knew. She knew I had found them. And she knew the war had just gone nuclear. By 7 o'clock that evening, the house was a tomb. The temperature had dropped to 55 degrees inside. We were all wearing coats in the living room. The silence was heavy, broken only by the sound of Barrett's stomach growling. I sat in the corner, reading a book by the light of a battery-operated lantern. I was comfortable. I had prepared. I had a thermal layer on under my sweater. They were miserable. I am starving, Barrett moaned from the sofa. He was wrapped in a throw blanket, shivering. Nora, order a pizza. Use your phone data. I told you, I said without looking up. My account is empty, and I canceled the credit cards this morning because of the suspicious activity. Suspicious activity? Julian snapped. You mean the money I gave Mom? You froze our cards over that? I froze them because $10,000 vanished, Julian, I said calmly. The bank flagged it as theft. I just agreed with them. Well, fix it, Bernice commanded. She was sitting in the wingback chair, wearing her fur coat inside. She looked like a deposed queen in a refugee camp. We cannot starve. There is nothing in the fridge but condiments and tap water. You cleared it out. I donated the perishables to the food bank, I said. Since the power is out, it would have spoiled. I hate waste. You did it on purpose, Kayla hissed. Her teeth were chattering. You want us to suffer. I want you to leave, I thought, but I didn't say it. Instead, I smiled a tight, polite smile. Why don't you order takeout, Bernice? I asked. You have plenty of cash on hand, $10,000, right? Surely you can spare $50 to feed your hungry grandchildren. Bernice froze. The room went silent. Everyone looked at her. I cannot access that money, she stammered. It is a cashier's check. For the surgeon. It is made out to the clinic. Liar. The bank teller had said cash. Large bills. That is a shame, I said. I guess we are having crackers for dinner. Or maybe Barrett can check the cushions in his rental truck. I bet there is some loose change in there. Barrett glared at me, hatred burning in his eyes. He stood up and stormed into the kitchen. I heard cupboards slamming. He came back with a box of dry, uncooked pasta. He sat down and started crunching on a raw noodle. It was pathetic. It was satisfying. The next morning, the cold had settled into the bones of the house. I woke up to the sound of screaming. Look at this, Bernice was yelling. Look at it. I walked out of my bedroom. Bernice was standing in the hallway, holding up a white skirt suit. It was her first Sunday suit, the one she wore to impress the church elders. It was stained with coffee and what looked like cranberry sauce. My suit is ruined, she shrieked. I need this for Sunday service. Reverend Jenkins is preaching. I have to look immaculate. She threw the suit at me. I sidestepped, and it landed in a heap on the floor. Wash it, she ordered. Now. The power is out, Bernice, I said, stepping over the pile. The washing machine is electric. It does not work. Then take it to the cleaners, she yelled. Drive it there, pay for the rush service. I have no money, I repeated. It was my new mantra, and I am not your maid. You are useless, Bernice spat. You live in my son's house. You eat his food, and you cannot even help his mother in a crisis. You are a terrible wife, Nora. No wonder Julian is always so stressed. He has to carry the weight of this family while you play architect with your little drawings. Toxic benevolence, I thought. She was framing her cruelty as concern for Julian. If you need it cleaned so badly, I said, there's a bucket in the garage, and I think I saw a bar of soap in the downstairs bathroom, the one the tenants use. Maybe you can ask them for help. Oh wait, they left when the heat turned off, didn't they? Bernice's eyes narrowed. She knew I knew. You are a wicked woman, she whispered. God will punish you. Maybe, I said, but right now God seems to be punishing you with a dirty suit and no electricity. I walked away. I heard her pick up the suit and stomp toward the bathroom. She was going to wash it in the sink with cold water. It would never dry in this freezing house. It would smell like mildew by Sunday. Perfect. That night, the house was even colder. I had put Zara to bed with 3 blankets and a hot water bottle I had filled using the gas stove, which still worked. I was restless. I walked down the hallway, avoiding the creaky boards. I saw a flicker of orange light coming from the sunroom. I stopped. I pressed myself against the wall. Julian and Bernice were in there. They had lit a dozen candles. It looked like a seance. Bernice was leaning forward, her hands gripping Julian's knee. She is dangerous, Julian, Bernice whispered. Her voice was low, urgent. She cut the power. She starved us. She is mentally unstable. I think she is having a breakdown. I know, Mom. Julian sighed. He sounded exhausted. I do not know what to do. She has never been like this. It is the stress, Bernice said. She cannot handle the pressure of this house, and now with the money issues, Julian, you have to protect yourself. You have to protect the family assets. What do you mean? The house, Bernice said. If she snaps, if she files for divorce, she could try to take it. She could try to kick you out. You need to secure the deed. My breath hitched. I listened harder. It is already in my name, Mom, Julian said. Well, technically isn't good enough, Bernice hissed. You need to put it in a trust, a family trust, managed by me. That way it is untouchable. If she leaves, she gets nothing. The house stays with the Wilsons. I do not know. Julian hesitated. She pays the mortgage. Exactly, Bernice said. She feels entitled to it. That is why she is acting out. She thinks she owns you. You need to remind her who is the head of this household. Make her sign it over, Julian. Tell her it is for tax purposes. Tell her it is to protect her from liability. Use those big words she likes. She will believe you. She is not that smart. I waited. I prayed. Say no, Julian. Defend me. Tell her I am your wife. You are right, Julian said softly. She is acting crazy. A trust would be safer. I will talk to her when the power comes back on. I will get her to sign. The air left my lungs. He agreed. He was going to trick me into signing over my own house to his mother. He wasn't just a coward. He was a traitor. I backed away silently. The sadness I had felt for the death of my marriage evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard clarity. He wanted a war? I would give him an apocalypse. I went back to my bedroom. I locked the door. I walked to the mirror and looked at myself. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes, but my eyes themselves, they were different. They were harder. I looked down at my left hand. The diamond solitaire sparkled in the moonlight. It was a nice ring. I had picked it out. I had paid for half of it, though Julian told everyone he bought it. It felt heavy. It felt like a shackle. I twisted it. It was tight. My fingers were swollen from the cold and the stress. I pulled harder. It scraped over my knuckle, scratching the skin. With a final tug, it came off. My finger looked naked. There was a pale band of skin where the gold had been for 7 years. I didn't cry. I didn't throw it across the room. I walked to the vent in the floor. I pried the cover up with my fingernails. I took the ring and dropped it into the dark, dusty hole. Clink, clink, clink. It tumbled down the ductwork, gone forever. I replaced the vent cover. Goodbye, Julian, I whispered. I wasn't a wife anymore. I was a landlord preparing for an eviction, and I needed to set the final trap. The next morning, the sun came out, warming the house slightly, but the power was still off. I told everyone I was going to a coffee shop to work because I had a deadline. I didn't go to a coffee shop. I went to the library. I sat at a public computer and opened a word processor. I spent an hour crafting the lie. It had to be perfect. It had to be believable enough to trigger their greed, but grandiose enough to make them reckless. Subject: confidential, promotion offer, regional director. I typed up a formal offer letter on letterhead I created, using the logo of Julian's company. Dear Julian Wilson, we are pleased to offer you the position of Regional Director of Logistics. This role comes with a significant increase in responsibility and compensation. Base salary, $250,000. Signing bonus, $45,000, payable immediately upon acceptance. Stock options, 5,000 shares. Please keep this confidential until the official announcement on January 2nd. It was a masterpiece. It played into every insecurity Julian had. It validated every lie he had ever told his mother about his importance at work. I printed it on high-quality ivory paper. I put it in a heavy linen envelope. I sealed it with a red wax sticker I found in my craft bag. It looked official. It looked like money. I drove back to the house. The driveway was still blocked by Barrett's tank. I walked into the kitchen. No one was there. They were probably huddled in the living room under blankets. I placed the envelope on the kitchen island right next to the coffee maker, which didn't work, but they kept checking it out of habit. I placed it so the confidential stamp was facing up. Then I went to my room to wait. It took 20 minutes. I heard footsteps in the kitchen, then a gasp. "Oh my God!" Bernice's voice shrieked. "Kayla, Julian, get in here!" I cracked my door open. "What is it?" Julian asked, stumbling into the kitchen. "Look," Bernice yelled. "This letter. It was on the counter. Julian, look at this." I heard paper tearing. "Regional Director?" Julian read, his voice confused. I did not know I was up for this. $250,000! Kayla screamed. And a $45,000 bonus, right now. "I told you!" Bernice shouted triumphantly. "I told you my son was a king. I knew they would recognize your genius eventually. Oh, Julian, baby, we are rich." "But," Julian stammered, "I haven't talked to my boss. I sent an email asking for a review, but—" "Do not question it," Bernice snapped. "It is in writing. It is official. Accept it immediately." "We have to celebrate," Kayla said. "We have to throw a party, a real party, to show everyone." "Yes," Bernice agreed. "Tonight, we will call everyone. The Jenkins, the choir, Cousin Marcus. We will show them that the Wilsons are back on top." "But the power," Julian said. "Who cares about the power?" Bernice scoffed. "We will rent generators. We will hire a caterer with portable ovens. We have $45,000 coming, Julian. Don't be cheap." I don't have the money yet," Julian said. "Use the emergency card," Bernice commanded, "the one attached to the house account. We can pay it off as soon as the bonus check clears. This is an investment in your image, Julian. You have to look the part of a director." I watched my phone. I had the banking app open. I had unfrozen the credit card 10 minutes ago, specifically for this moment. 5 minutes later, a notification popped up. Transaction alert Ladau Events and Catering. Amount $6,500. She didn't hesitate. She didn't ask. She just spent. I smiled. $6,500. That was grand larceny. That was a felony. She had just bought her own handcuffs. While Bernice was screaming at a generator rental company on the phone, trying to use the stolen credit card number to secure power for her vanity party, I slipped out the back door. I drove to a Waffle House parking lot 3 miles away. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle that matched the feeling in my gut. I was meeting Silas. He wasn't a friend. He was a private investigator I had hired the hard way, meaning I had sold my grandmother's silver tea set to a pawn shop yesterday to pay his retainer in cash. No paper trails. Silas tapped on my window. He looked like a man who had seen too many cheating spouses and not enough sunlight. He handed me a thick manila envelope. "You are not going to like this, Nora," he said, blowing smoke into the cold air. "Or maybe you will. Depends on how much you hate these people." I opened the envelope. I pulled out a stack of photos and documents. "The guy Barrett?" Silas pointed a yellow-stained finger at a photo of my brother-in-law entering a pawn shop. "He is not a day trader. He is a former junior accountant who got fired 18 months ago for skimming petty cash. He has been unemployed ever since." I flipped the page. A document from a rental agency. "And the car? The Titan?" Silas chuckled. "It is a daily rental. He put it on a credit card that declined yesterday. They reported it stolen this morning. There is a repo order out on it right now. They are tracking the GPS." "Stolen," I whispered. "Grand theft auto, technically," Silas said, "if he does not return it within 48 hours of the contract expiring. We are at hour 46. I looked at the last document. It was a printout of a text log Silas had legally subpoenaed through a connection, based on the threat to life clause I had flagged. "Unknown number. You have until midnight, Barrett, or we break legs." "He owes a bookie $5,000, Silas said. "He is desperate, Nora. Desperate people do dangerous things." I put the papers back in the envelope. It felt heavy. It felt like ammunition. "Thank you, Silas," I said. "Be careful," he warned. "When you pull the rug out, make sure you are not standing on it." "I am not on the rug," I said, starting the engine. "I am holding the match." When I got back, the house was vibrating. The rental generators had arrived. Bernice had bullied them into setting up 2 massive industrial units in the backyard. The noise was deafening, a constant mechanical roar that shook the windows. I walked upstairs. I found Bernice in Zara's bedroom. My heart stopped. Bernice was tossing Zara's clothes onto the hallway floor. T-shirts, jeans, her favorite sweater, all of it landing in a heap. "What are you doing?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. Bernice didn't even look at me. She was stripping the sheets off Zara's bed. "We need this room for the coat check," she announced. "And Reverend Jenkins might need to lie down before the toast. He has a bad back. I cannot have him sleeping in a room that smells like teenager." "This is her room, Bernice," I said. "Where is she supposed to sleep?" "There's a sleeping bag in the garage," Bernice said, dusting her hands. "It builds character. Besides, she spends all her time in your office anyway. She does not need a bed." She opened Zara's dresser drawer. It was empty. Bernice paused. She opened the next one. Empty. She turned to me, a cruel smirk twisting her lips. "Look at this. She has nothing. You really are destitute, aren't you, Nora? The child has no clothes. It is a blessing I am taking over. I will buy her some decent things once Julian's bonus clears. Charity starts at home." She thought Zara had no clothes because we were poor. She didn't realize the drawers were empty because Zara and I had packed everything that mattered into the trunk of my car 3 hours ago. Zara was sitting on the stairs, watching. She wasn't crying. She was holding her backpack tight. She looked at me and gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. "Let her do it, Mom," her eyes said. "Let her dig the hole." "You are right, Bernice," I said, swallowing the bile in my throat. "Charity does start at home. Remember that." By 8 o'clock, my home had been transformed into a grotesque parody of wealth. The generators powered floodlights that bathed the house in a golden glow. A caterer was setting up a carving station in the living room, slicing a prime rib that cost more than my first car. The guests arrived. These weren't my friends. They were Bernice's church choir, Kayla's influencer acquaintances, and a few of Julian's confused co-workers who had been summoned last minute. I stood on the balcony, looking down. I wore a black dress, sharp, severe. I looked like a widow at a funeral, which was fitting, because I was about to bury my marriage. Julian was down there, wearing a tuxedo he had bought 3 years ago. It was tight around the waist. He was holding a glass of champagne, laughing too loudly. He looked manic. He believed the lie. He believed he was the regional director. He believed he was safe. Barrett was by the window, nervously checking the driveway every 30 seconds. He was drinking heavily. He knew the repo man was coming. He just hoped the party would shield him. Bernice was the queen. She wore the fur coat, sweating in the generator heat, holding court. "My son, the director," she boomed to the Reverend. "God has blessed us. We are looking at vacation homes in Aspen. We need to expand the portfolio." I walked over to the AV system. Barrett had set up a massive flat-screen TV to stream music videos. It was connected to the Wi-Fi, which I had reactivated 10 minutes ago, just for this. I pulled out my phone. I opened the Screen Mirror app. I had a slideshow ready. I took a deep breath. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The fear was gone. There was only the cold, mechanical precision of the execution. "Showtime," I whispered. Bernice clinked a spoon against her glass. The sound cut through the chatter. The music lowered. "Attention, everyone," she shouted, waving her hand. "Gather round." The crowd shuffled toward the fireplace. Julian stood next to her, beaming, sweating, looking like a man who had won the lottery but lost his soul. "We are here to celebrate my son," Bernice announced. "Julian Wilson, the new regional director of logistics." Applause. Julian waved, trying to look humble and failing. "But we are also here to make an announcement about the future of this family," Bernice continued. Her voice dropped to a serious, pious tone. "Success attracts envy. It attracts parasites." She didn't look at me, but everyone else did. The implication hung in the air like smog. "To protect our legacy," Bernice said, "Julian has decided to place this house, his house, into a Wilson family trust, managed by me. This ensures that no matter what happens, this home will always belong to the bloodline, to the people who deserve it." Kayla clapped wildly. "Yes, keep it in the family." Julian nodded. He opened his mouth to speak, to seal his fate, to publicly agree to steal my home. "Thank you, Mom," he began. "I think it is the right move. We need to be smart about assets." I stepped out of the shadows. "I agree," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried perfectly in the sudden silence. We absolutely need to be smart about assets. The crowd parted. I walked down the stairs. I felt 10 feet tall. "Nora," Bernice hissed, "this is a private family moment. Go back to the kitchen." "But I have an announcement, too," I said, smiling. I held up my phone. "And since we are sharing family business, I thought I would share some visuals." I tapped the screen. The music video on the big TV vanished. It was replaced by a high-resolution PDF document. Warranty deed. Grantee, Zuri Holdings, LLC. Sole member, Nora Wilson. The room went deadly silent. "What is that?" Julian squinted at the screen. "That," I said, walking toward him, "is the deed to this house. Look closely, Julian. Does your name appear anywhere on it?" "We bought this together," Julian stammered. "No," I said, "I bought it. Through my LLC. I paid the down payment, I pay the mortgage, you pay the electric bill, which, by the way, you forgot to pay this month." "That is a lie," Bernice shrieked. "My son is the regional director. He makes $250,000 a year." I swiped the screen. The fake offer letter appeared, the one I had printed that morning. "Read the signature, Julian," I said. Julian looked at the screen. He turned pale. The signature at the bottom didn't say the CEO's name. It said, "I am a fraud." "I typed that this morning," I said coldly. "There is no promotion. There is no bonus. I wanted to see if you were delusional enough to believe it. And I wanted to see if your mother was greedy enough to spend money she didn't have." I swiped again. "Transaction alert, $6,500, declined. Reason: card reported stolen. Actually, I corrected myself, I let the charge go through initially to establish intent, but then I reported it. The police are very interested in credit card fraud over $5,000. That is a felony, Bernice. Bernice clutched her chest. You set me up. This is entrapment. It is not entrapment, I said. It is a character test, and you failed. The chaos erupted instantly. The Reverend started backing toward the door. The choir members were whispering furiously. You are crazy, Barrett shouted, stepping forward. You are just jealous. Get out of our house. Your house? I laughed. Barrett, you do not even have a car. I swiped the screen one last time. The repo order, the gambling debts, the text from the loan shark threatening to break his legs. The repo man is at the gate, Barrett, I said. I buzzed him in 5 minutes ago. He is hooking up the Titan right now. As if on cue, the flashing yellow lights of a tow truck washed over the front window. My truck! Barrett screamed. He ran for the door, but the door opened before he could get there. It wasn't the repo man. It was 2 uniformed police officers and a man in a suit, the fire marshal. Who is Bernice Wilson? The lead officer asked. Bernice shrank back against the fireplace. I am. Ma'am, we have a warrant to inspect the basement, the fire marshal said. We received photographic evidence of an illegal commercial boarding operation with severe fire code violations, endangerment of a minor. And, the police officer added, we have a report of credit card theft filed by a Nora Wilson. Julian looked at me. His eyes were wide, terrified. He looked at his mother, who was trembling. He looked at the screen, proving he owned nothing. Nora, he pleaded, dropping to his knees. Nora, please, send them away. We can talk. I love you. I looked down at him. He looked small. I threw my ring in the vent, Julian, I said. We are done talking. I turned to the officer. That is her. The woman in the fur coat. And that man running out the back door? That is Barrett. He is driving a stolen rental. The room dissolved into pandemonium. Police chasing Barrett. The fire marshal ordering everyone out. Bernice screaming that she was a woman of God while they handcuffed her. I walked over to Zara, who was standing by the kitchen door wearing her backpack. Ready? I asked. Ready, she said. I looked at the house. My beautiful house. It was full of cops and liars. Everyone out, the fire marshal boomed. This structure is condemned until the electrical is replaced. Evacuate immediately. I walked out the front door, holding Zara's hand. We walked past Julian, who was sobbing on the lawn. We walked past the tow truck, dragging Barrett's fake life away. I got into my sedan. I locked the doors. I didn't look back. It has been 90 days since the red wedding of Christmas, and the silence in my house is the most expensive luxury I own. The divorce is not final yet, but it is close. Julian contested it at first, claiming he contributed to the home's value, but once I presented the receipts for the cataract surgery theft and the bank statements showing I paid 100% of the mortgage, his lawyer advised him to settle. He is currently living in a studio apartment above a bowling alley. He works double shifts at the warehouse, the actual job he had before he started pretending to be an executive. Barrett is in jail. It turns out the Titan wasn't the only thing he stole. He had a warrant in Florida for check fraud. Kayla divorced him 2 weeks after the arrest. She moved back in with her parents, but, well, her parents aren't doing so well. Bernice avoided jail time for the credit card fraud because I agreed to drop the charges in exchange for a permanent restraining order. However, the illegal boarding house fines bankrupt her. She lost her own home to pay the city citations. She is currently living in a state-subsidized senior living facility. I heard the other residents hate her because she keeps trying to charge them for prayer circles. As for the house, I sold it. I couldn't live there anymore. The ghost of the basement tenants and the memory of the socks were too loud. I sold it for a massive profit. Zara and I moved to a smaller place, a loft in the city with huge windows and great light. I bought her the iPad Pro with the stylus. She draws every day. Last week, she drew a picture of us, just the two of us standing in front of a castle. She didn't draw a king. She didn't draw a grandma. She drew a dragon protecting the gate. "That is you, Mom," she said. She was right. I am not the princess in the tower anymore. I am the dragon, and I dare anyone to try and steal my gold again. If this story resonated with you, leave a like and consider subscribing. You can also drop any comment below, even just one word. Maybe tell me where you're watching from.